What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy, back in the hometown community, and we are back for another episode of 10 card upgrade show where I take a precon and recommend 10 cards to upgrade the deck with. Today we're finishing out our fourth and final precon for Murders of Karlov, Manor, Deadly Disguise, headed up by Kaust, Eyes of the Glade. If this is your first time ever looking at this precon, Kaust is a commander that cares about turning face down creatures face up. Primarily, and the most common ways to do that are through mechanics like Disguise, Manifest. The new set also has Cloaking, as well as Morph and Megamorph. We're going to put them in the battlefield face down from either there or other abilities, flip them face up with Kaust, and deal damage to draw cards as we push our game forward in combat. I like this deck a lot. I think it has a lot of good value in it, and in fact, there's a lot of great ways to draw cards, refill our hand, and a lot of creatures that are going to help us hit even harder. But the goal of this series is to try to use 10 cards to make our deck a little bit more synergistic, a little bit more powerful, and try to allow us to punch a little bit harder into our opponents. First, we're going to talk about the 10 cards that I recommend adding to the deck, and then we will talk about what cards I would recommend taking out. The 10 cards I have here, I believe the budget is about $20, if give or take. That's going to allow you to add these 10 cards to the deck and allow us to just, again, try to get a little more synergistic, try to get a little bit more fun. And a couple of these are these new disguise creatures that I really want us to try in this deck, as well as we got new disguise creatures in the deck, but we want to use some from the set and bring them in. I'm going to go through card by card of these 10 cards, tell you why we're going to add it to the deck, and then I'll go through the 10 cards I would take out. First up, we have Aurelia's Vindicator. 4 mana, 4/2 Angel, Flying Lifelink Ward 2. It has Disguise X, 3 and a white. So when it's turned face up, we exile up to X other target creatures from the battlefield or creatures from graveyards. And whenever Aurelia's Vindicator leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hand. What I like about the Vindicator is, right, we put it for 3 mana face down as a 2/2 with Ward 2. That's the Disguise. And at any time, we can come up and remove some creatures. The thing we need to remember about Disguise, if you're still getting used to this deck or you're looking into it, is remember that these creatures can be flipped up for this Disguise cost at instant speed, and it cannot be responded to by other spells and abilities. So this is important because we could potentially use this for some removal. If not, once it gets flipped face up, it's a 4/2 lifelinker in the air that's going to help keep us afloat as we get into this combat and have some fun. Next up is Cultivate. The deck includes a copy of Nature's Lore and 3 Visits, which are both great reprints, especially when we have lands that have dual typings, as well as some of the new lands from the set that we didn't add, but you could add, as well as our Triome and other dual lands that have typings. But we are still playing basic lands, and we might as well play some more ramp. We're not playing, actually the deck does not include Rampant Growth or Kodama's Reach, so I wanted to still put in something. I thought we have 2 mana ramp spells. Let's add a 3 mana one. Cultivate's good for that. Get 2 basic lands, 1 on the battlefield, tap 1 in your hand. Just going to help us get to being able to play multiple morph creatures per turn quicker. Expose the Culprit from the main set, an uncommon. We could choose one or both. Turn target face down, creature face up. That's killer because then we don't have to pay the cost for that. Or exile any number of face-up creatures you control with Disguise in a face-down pile, shuffle that pile, and then cloak them. So that can be kind of confusing. Let's walk through step by step. We take any number of face-up creatures we want with Disguise in a face-down pile, shuffle that pile so that no one knows which one is which, and cloak them. So we put them back down as 2/2s with Ward 2, and we could flip them face up. This can do one of 2 things. One, if we have a couple creatures that we really like the abilities of, we can put them back face down to use them again to stop our opponents from, or to get their abilities again. But the second is you can also use this defensively, because if your opponent has a spell that targets, let's say they have a spell that targets multiple of our creatures and says return them to hand or destroy them, Expose the Culprit will basically pick them up and put them back down. The original targets are no longer there, so that spell will go away, and then we still have access to them. No, this won't get us around a board wipe. This won't get us around the Cyclonic Rift. But if our opponents are really getting us in trouble with that, we can do that. Or, another thing I just thought of, this protects us in combat as well. If we swing with face-up creatures with Disguise and our opponents block them in a way we didn't expect, throw this, pick them up, put them back down, they're removed from combat. and they survive. Flawless Maneuver is a protection spell that says creatures you control gain indestructible till end of turn. If we control our commander, we can cast it for free. It's probably the single best protection spell that you can put in this color, 3 colors, except Heroic Intervention, which is 2 mana. Both of these are cards I would recommend. Heroic Intervention is a little more expensive, which is why I chose Flawless Maneuver. It's kind of insane to me that Heroic Intervention is more expensive, considering Flawless Maneuver is able to be cast for free. But the difference is Heroic Intervention protects all of your permanents, whereas Flawless Maneuver just protects your creatures. So I can kind of understand why that could be the case. But hey, $10, this is a great card. You can cast it for free when your commander's out, and it will help you protect your board. The deck does not come with any way to protect your board, really, so I think it's worth it. Hide in Plain Sight. It's a fun card from the set. Look at the top 5. Cloak 2 of them, but the rest of the bottom. So we just talked about cloaking. Pick 2 cards, put them face down. Now, the cool part about cloaking in this scenario is we can pick a creature that doesn't have disguise, morph, megamorph, or anything like that. And if it's a creature, we can turn it face up at any time for its mana cost. Or if we choose to cloak a non-creature card, it just sits there as a 2/2 with Ward 2, and it's just another creature that we can use to our benefit. So I kind of like that about cloaking, is you kind of have that option. Same thing with manifesting cards off the top of your library with some of our other effects we have in the deck. If you manifest a non-creature card, that's fine. Use it with 2/2 now. Jasmine Broil is 7, taps for 2 mana, and we can only cast creature spells with no abilities. I do believe that this works with disguise and all of that. I could be 100% wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But no matter what, it'll help us once we get to the second ability, which is creatures we control with no abilities can't be blocked by creatures with abilities. Yes, this is a teeny bit of a non-bow with our disguise cards since they come down with Ward 2. But our Morph, Megamorph, Manifested, and all those cards that don't come down with Ward 2 will then be unblockable. And I think that trade-off's more than worth it when we have lots of ways to get those cards face down. Pyrotechnic Performer says whenever it or another creature you control is turned face up, that creature deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. And this is great because this works for all of the creatures that can flip themselves up, but it also works for Cloak and Manifest if creatures flip themselves up. So this is a great ability of dealing up some opponent, meaning we have to do less damage in combat than we thought we had to. Rhythm of the Wild, to me, is a Gruul staple. If your deck includes red or green and you care anything about creatures, I think Rhythm of the Wild belongs in the deck. Creature spells we control can't be countered, and non-token creatures we control have riots. When they come in, they have their choice of a +1/+1 counter or haste. When a creature flips up, it won't come in, but when we do cast that 3 mana 2/2 with Ward 2 with Disguise face down, we would still get this choice, and then it can get a counter or or haste for the turn, and that's important. I think more than often that I would pick the counter, only because then that synergizes with Jasmine, as well as it also synergizes with Duskana, our alternate commander who cares about creatures with base power and have this 2/2. I like them being a little bit bigger so that either that buff from Duskana or that unblockability makes sense. Now for the Disguise creatures, of course, that's a non-bow with Jasmine's bill anyway, so you probably would still take the +1/+1 counter to make it bigger. But I'm just trying to say, sometimes you want to think about when you're putting them down what makes more sense. If you need them to attack right away, get the haste, otherwise get the counter. Unyielding Gatekeeper from the main set, whenever it's turned face up, exile another target non-land permanent. If we controlled it, we return it to the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, its controller creates a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. Now that may seem odd because you're asking yourself, why would we want to blink one of our own things? Well, if we have anything that has enter the battlefield ability, or anything that really cares about, mainly an enter battlefield ability, we have a couple of them, and that could be important. Now, it does come in tapped, which is fine if it can, some cases, if we really care about the ability that creature attacking, then maybe it's not worth targeting with this ability. But I think Gatekeeper is pretty important. The other place I see Gatekeeper being really popular is in those blink decks that care about that. But I still think this is good. Again, it could protect a creature, right? Because it exiles and comes back in, get a creature out of combat, protect a creature from removal spell. The same things we kind of talked about with Expose the Culprit are also there for Gatekeeper, and I think that's important. And our last card is Yaris, Roar of the Old Gods from the new set. Other creatures we control have haste. Whenever one or more face-down creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card. Great. So Kaust does it when we attack creatures if they've been flipped up this turn. Yaris does it if they're face down. Cool, it means we're probably almost, that gives us multiple opportunities to draw a card on combat. But Yaris has a big ability that I really like. Whenever a face-down creature you control dies, return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control if it's a permanent, then return it, then flip it face up. I really like this ability for 2 reasons. One, all of our disguise cards, morph cards, all of that want this. But the best part about this is if we start cloaking or manifesting creatures that don't have disguise, Yaris is going to let us get them back and flip them face up and allow us to then have their abilities. And that's important because we don't have to pay for them flipping back face up. I think that's something that we don't want to discount. But Yaris, to me, looks like a powerhouse of value, and it's only 60 cents because it's really only going to be played in these types of decks, but I like it. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see this get played elsewhere just for the haste, if that's something people care about. But the main place that's going to get played is in decks like these, where we care about face-down creatures and can flip them, get them flipped back face up. Well, let's talk about the 10 cards that I took out. 9 of these I really took out because I had no qualms about them. One I took out only because I couldn't find another card to take out, and so we'll talk about them when we get there. First up is Imperial Hellkite, one of the new morph creatures. 8 mana. When you flip it up, you search your library for a dragon card, reveal it, put it to your hand, then shuffle. This Precon only has one other dragon, which is Scourge of the Throne. I'm not saying that's not worth it to play it to get Scourge of the Throne, but if you get Scourge of the Throne before this, there's no other dragons for you to get. So you either add a dragon, or this card kind of just becomes not dead. It's still 6/6, but to me it just seems overcosted if you're not playing more dragons, and that's the reason I took it out. Croson Cloud Scraper. Beginning your upkeep, we sack it unless we pay double green, and its morph cost is just huge. This is just, if you wanted to play it as another card to put face down and try to cheekily flip it up another way, that's fine. Otherwise, I just don't think it's worth the mana. Same thing for Croson Colossus. 8 mana to flip it up. It's a 9/9. Again, I think there's other cards that have more value, and I would rather have the ability to leave some of my creatures open to flip up to use their abilities when I need them, rather than bog my board down with these big guys that it's going to take forever. Root Elemental says whenever it's turned face up, you can put a creature card from your hand on the battlefield. I really like that effect, and of the 5 of these morph creatures I took out, I think this is the one I like the best. But again, to me, I just wanted to bring in some more synergy, bring in some more utility, and take a big one like this out. Tessic Judas Hellhound is a card that I'm kind of confused what it's doing in the deck. It has Unleash. It says other dogs we control have Unleash. Creatures we control with counters on them have Haste. And whenever it attacks, we get a red for each attacking creature. I know why it's in the deck. Adding red mana when we get attacking creatures makes sense. But to me, we don't have enough dogs in the deck for this to make sense. This one just kind of confuses me. I also get creatures with counters on them have haste if we pair this with Rhythm of the Wild or other things. I just don't think it works in the deck. It would work a lot better in a deck that cares about dogs or in other decks, but to me, it just didn't make sense here. Thelanite Hermit. All Saprolings get +1/+1, and when it flips face up, 4 Saprolings. That makes sense. You're making 4 2/2s. I get it. I just, again, cards with more value. Dust to Dawn was a card I can understand why I was in here, but I felt like we needed to take out a board wipe and get some more card draw or some more value in there. Destroy all creatures of power 3 or greater, and then the aftermath size is return all creatures of power 2 from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, makes sense. Another board wipe. We still have Austere Command, which most of the time should get around our creatures. We destroy all creatures with mana value 4 or greater. Should help us get around that. And we do still have Fell the Mighty. Pick one of our morph creatures and destroy every creature with power 3 or greater. So we still got plenty of it in there. It's not like we're losing it. Well, this is the 4th deck in the row I cut Ransom Note just because I just don't like the card. It comes in, you surveil 1, pay 2 to draw a card, go to creature, cloak the top card of our library. I get it. It would make a little bit more sense in this deck when we can cloak a creature. It worked in the goad deck because it goads a creature. I get it, but I'd rather have something else, more synergerful, I guess is the word I'll use. And so I'm sorry that I cut it from all 4 of these precons. I'm sorry, I just don't like the card. Wild Growth was the one card I wanted to keep in. I love Wild Growth. It's one of my favorite mana ramp cards that we get the privilege to play in Commander. In Channel Land, it taps for an additional green. I love it. It's a great card, and I want to try to work it back in if I can. 10th card is Temple of the False God. I think I've cut this from every deck that's had it in it of these 4. Temple of the False God is not a bad land. I just think it's more often than not, it hurts you. So before you get to 5 lands, Temple of the False God taps for no mana at all. And that could be very tough if it's one of 3 lands your opening hand or 2 lands your opening hand, because it's just going to be dead. Great in the late game, terrible in the early game. I'd much rather play any other land. In fact, I would take this out for another dual land or even a tri-land that comes in tap, because it's still going to do you more value than this. I'm sure there's going to be people out there that want to defend Temple of the False God. I'd love to talk to you about it down in the comments, but I don't like Temple of the False God, and I'd rather have it out. But that's my pick for the 10 cards to take out and the 10 cards to put in. Let me know, what do you think of my upgrades for Deadly Disguise? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.